So maybe I'm going to ask Julia and Lisa to introduce yourself a little bit since you're just coming on stage. And Sivan, if you want to say more. Ian, if you want to say more. Yes, yes, of course. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for mentioning it.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I am Julia Levine. I am artistic producer of Arts and Climate Initiative, and I've been working with Chantal since formally 2017, and really, well, I'll talk about how I've worked with CCTA specifically. And yes, I come from the theater. I have a theater background, and now I'm doing social work, and I'm actually working towards a drama therapy certification because of the climate crisis, to be able to use my theater experience and my mental health training to address the mental health impacts of climate. That's me.
Hi, my name is Lisa Woynarski, and I am Associate Professor of Theatre at the University of Reading in the UK. I'm originally from Canada, and I'm actually here because I'm heading back to the UK, and this is an extended stopover that worked out well to be here today. My research is in theatre and climate and performance, and thinking about how performance can really make an intervention into climate crisis, particularly around climate justice. And I'll talk about the events that I've organized a little bit later and how I've used the CCTA plays a little bit later. But yeah.
Hi again. Just a little bit more about myself because I mainly introduced the company in the context of this event. But I am an actor, writer, director, translator, reluctant producer, because that's how indie theater works. And our theater company and my sort of background is in site-specific theater. So I've always done plays outside. I've always loved thinking about how the nature and the show combines. The outside is not only the stage, but it's kind of the world we live in. So we need to be conscious of that when making our art. So as soon as I heard about CCTA, I think I saw like a Q&A online, and I had to physically like stop myself from emailing at like 2 a.m. that I want to be a part of the festival. I sent the email at 8 a.m. the following morning like an adult. But I loved being a part of this festival.
I've had a bit of an introduction, but in the context of putting on events for the CCTA, because I'm an associate professor of ecological design for performance at York University in Toronto, that I've always pushed to have an ecoscenography or a design aspect to the CCTA since the first year. That's sort of how, even though Chantal and I had collaborated on things before and had been in touch with things before, after that first 2015, I was like, how do we get designers involved in that? How do we get the entire production process involved in it? And that sort of cascaded into a number of different ways in which not only in working to collaborate on organizing the CCTA, but then also coordinating CCTA events at various types of events or bringing them into the classroom as well. So I found them also very useful as well.
I should be sitting in the middle. So I would love for each of you to talk a little bit about what event or events you have organized in the past, how you've used the plays. Yeah, let's just start with that. And yeah.
Yes. Now as Arts and Climate Initiative, then we were called the Arctic Cycle. I worked with Chantal to organize launch events in New York City for 2017, 2019, 2021, and 2023. And also in 2019, we had a bonus event. We were at Uptown. So can I go into all of them right now?
Yeah.
Okay. So in 2017, I was working with Chantal, and she was telling me about this festival. I'm like, let's have a launch. Let's do something. So at that time there was the Artist Co-op. It was in Hell's Kitchen, and we put together a series of readings and of the CCTA plays. It's been mentioned, Where is the Hope was the theme. And we did a New York launch. We also invited some New York City comedians and musicians to also make an event, kind of like party, festival launch. And we were able to live stream with Ian and his collaborators at York because they were launching in Toronto at the same time. And our action at that time was donations for Hurricane Harvey. So we raised hurricane relief for Texas at that time. And then in 2019, we were like, okay, we did it. We had a launch event, and CCTA has momentum. Let's go a little bigger. Let's get a venue, so like a theater venue. So we produced, as part of the Lighting the Way in CCTA 2019, our event was Setting the Stage for a Better Planet, and we collaborated with Poetic People Power, their spoken word and poetry entity in New York City. So we had, a series of some 2019 plays, some poems, a song, actions, and a panel. So the panel had a scientist and a journalist and Miranda from the Climate Museum. So we kind of covered different aspects of the climate conversation. And throughout the event, audiences were invited to draw from buckets of actions and then share what action that they would take after the event. And we also were able to organize a bonus event in New York City. So climate change theater action uptown at the Caribbean Cultural Institute. We collaborated with Spanish-speaking director, and so we had an event of Spanish and English plays, as well as a conversation with someone from Sunrise Movement. So that was all in 2019. Again, another big year, and we were like, okay, let's go bigger. Oh, and also there has been a pandemic. So in 2021, we went outside. So the launch for the Envisioning a Green New Deal series became Dispatch to the Future, a theatrical journey through Central Park. And we collaborated with our friends, another local eco theater company, Superhero Clubhouse, to build a show for the northwest corner of Central Park. So groups of audience members could be guided on this theatrical journey to experience a handful of the plays from 2021, as well as learn or relearn about parts of Central Park's history. And at the end, it culminated in a climate ribbon experience, which is a project from Beautiful Trouble, another eco-activist organization. And then in 2023, I promise we're gonna get through it. In 2023, so we launched All Good Things Must Begin. That was the theme for 2023. And in New York City, we went back to Caveat, our venue on the Lower East Side, for The Future Within Us, and it was an event of plays and music, actually some original music for the production. And as part of the action, the audience was invited to select an eco tarot card. So we had a selection of the cards, and audiences selected one at the beginning, and then as part of the end of the performance, they learned about the meaning behind the tarot card, and it was connected to tailored resources based around those themes. So audiences could follow up and take action.
Are those tarot cards still available?
The tarot cards?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, we can.
Yeah, that would be great
eco
to see
tarot
them.
cards, we can share the.
Adrienne Jenick is the name of the artist who creates them.
That's very cool. So in at the University of Reading, I started to get involved with the 2019 Lighting the Way anthology, and I was teaching a class at the time called Performance and Ecology, and I got my students to choose one of the scripts and work on them. We did not have a public event at that time because that was like we did it for their assessment, basically. But since then, I've started to use the anthology a lot in different teaching aspects. And then in 2023, we had a big public event called the Reading Climate Theater Festival, where we were able to get some money from a community fund, and students, again, got to select their own which plays they wanted to do, stage them. They brought in a lot of aspects of eco-scenography, so we were able to do the design side as well. So my specialty is called eco-dramaturgy, and and so we did a lot of dramaturgical work on the plays as well. Then we involved local schools, and they came in for rehearsed readings, and that became all part of the festival. And some MA film students made films from the scripts as well. So it turned out to be I think a fantastic event. And because my university, the University of Reading, has a very active and well-known climate science department and is the originator of the climate stripe, so climate communication is a big thing. They were really pleased to support the event, actually. So we had a lot of great support for that, and we're looking forward to further iterations of the Reading Climate Theater Festival in the future as well.
Hell yeah, that's so cool. So we went on to the festival in 2023 as a very new theater company, straight off of our performance in Central Park, which is an interesting place because Central Park is kind of nature meets very institutionalized. I don't know if anyone has ever been through the process of getting a special event permit in Central Park from the Parks and Recs department, but it is a journey. It's an interesting process. And I knew that I really wanted to contrast that experience with working with a community garden. I have background in agriculture. Oh my God, I totally hit my mic. I have a background in agriculture and gardening. I grew up in the Mediterranean, where that's kind of a thing you learn at schools sometime. And I am very drawn to the idea of a community garden. Like, how wonderful is that? So I reached out to several community gardens, and we ended up collaborating with the Moore Jackson Community Garden and Cemetery in Woodside, Queens, which, if you haven't been, go. It is huge. It is beautiful. It has a cemetery from 1733. Great place. And I think that our event was unique and successful in that we really came there to see how our art can help support them. I didn't want to look at the garden as just a venue to help us promote our stuff. And our participation in the festival. I really took to heart the very brilliant instruction from the festival to combine an action element with your performance. And I called Elizabeth, who runs the garden, and I was like, what do you need? What is the best thing we can do right now as a theater company? Not as billionaire engineers, but with the arts to help support your goals. And it's so funny because she was so ready to support me that when I turned the question back to her, it was kind of a moment of confusion. And after that moment, she said, well, the real big program of this garden that we are investing a lot in is our community composting program. They collect food scraps every Saturday throughout the winter as well. So if you have food scraps and you live near Woodside, go drop them. And they have volunteers doing the community composting every year, and they have a lot of resources about the difference between industrial and community composting, and that's kind of their main thing. And immediately we started brainstorming, well, what can we do? Maybe we'll come volunteer for you, the actors. Maybe we'll do a talk back. We ended up settling on a demonstration, a live demonstration of the community composting process right after the show. So our audience members got to, and we asked people to bring food scraps, so they got to see the show and then see their food scraps being processed live. And another facet of the collaboration with the Garden is also Elizabeth asked me if I wanted to do the show as part of their annual Halloween event to help them kind of fill up the time with programming. That was very interesting because the people who came to the Halloween event weren't really our usual theater audience. We had a few people that we brought in. But we also had, and you can see it if you look our video on YouTube, kids running around with like bee costumes in the middle of the show, like, and other like how do you say, coloring pages, like stations, and the beekeepers of the Garden were there, and there were like a bunch of unrelated people there randomly. Some of them knew there was going to be a show, some of them did not know there was going to be a show. The content of the show, as you've seen, it is age appropriate. However, it is not maybe intended for such diverse audiences. So it was very interesting to see what people took from it. And it was also a lot of fun to have the play live in a world and not in an isolated, theatrical space, but with people. And the end where we ask, what is your dream? We asked people and they answered, and it was a brilliant discussion. It was so much fun to really get to experience climate fears and climate hope and the theme of all good things must begin in a community. It was really, really remarkable. And I love all of the plays in the anthology. I read all of them. Most of them had more than 4 actors, so we couldn't do them. But we had a great experience participating in this festival.
That's all. Yeah. Yes. I love hearing about the events because there's been hundreds of them in many different ways, and the way that they interact with space and they end up getting presented is always like things that I wouldn't necessarily expect or that I wouldn't have thought of too. So it's always nice to see that and hear about the different ways that they come together. And on the side where I've organized events for things, Julia had mentioned our launch event. I think that was the first CCTA event I actually organized. Was the launch event for 2017 where we coordinated between New York and Toronto. And because that was the sesquicentennial of Canada, we were able to get like support from Canada, and so we prioritized a number of Canadian playwrights. We brought them in for the launch event, so they got to be there with the first readings for them as well. And we also commissioned, that's the year where we started working with designers, and so we commissioned 10 designers to design the 10 Canadian plays, and they're in that version of that anthology. Which is currently not available for it. We're in the process of getting a second edition of that out. And then so following that and trying to grow that in 2019, working with a group called the Triga Creative, which was a trio of designers based in Toronto. We organized we wanted to design all 50 plays that were there. So we organized a eco-design charrette that lasted for just about 3 weeks. There was a core group of about a dozen different designers, either Toronto-based or had come in for this, and other people who dropped in. We went through a series of workshops that were open to folks in different ways of exploring materials, sustainability, etc. We read all the plays together, and then we designed them all. And first they were put on exhibition during Design Week in Toronto. So they have an open studio. So we opened the Triga studio for people to come through and see the designs that had come through. And then also created a companion book to Lighting the Way to the anthology, which was just a design book with these seated ideas that were coming through it. In 2021, we wanted to continue this, but there were challenges to having a in-person convening, but also, so we just made it more complicated instead. Some of us on the academic side, myself, our colleague Tanya Beer, who teaches at Griffith University in Brisbane, Australia, and Tessa Rickson, who teaches at the Queensland University of Technology, also in Brisbane. The 3 of us got together and decided to try and teach a class concurrently. in which we would have the students from all 3 universities collaborate on design ideas. And then Triga also continued organizing a global professional version, and then we'd have those crossover, so that we created, for an event called World Stage Design, which was in Calgary in August of 2022, we had an exhibition of all of the design ideas presented there. And so we worked in moving them around that way. And we sort of continued that a bit in 2023, where Tanya, Tessa, and I ran workshops at the Prague Quadrennial, which is it's in Prague. It happens every 4 years. Does what it says on the tin. But it's a gathering of global scenographers, designers, and so worked with large groups to create interventions throughout Prague based off of we were a little bit ahead of the festival, so with about a dozen of the plays that were ready to go ahead and created some exhibitions there during that. In addition to that, I just bring them into the classroom too. So I teach classes, one on like sustainable production and sustainable approaches to production, another one on eco-scenography and design approaches. And they alternate years, and the sustainability one always lines up with the CCTA. So we'll always start the class with one of the plays. So each of our 12 meetings ends up being a CCTA event. And so our action then becomes going through our topics of that day. And with the organization for it, and thanks to Chantal for doing this, so always like a thematic breakdown of things. So that always helps to align and figure out how to bring them into whatever we're discussing that day. And to start with the art side of things, because I'm mainly talking to art students and not specifically theater students, and bring in the art first, and then let's talk about, emissions calculations. So they have like an attachment to why they're doing it too.
I would like to ask you briefly, because for everyone who has ever written a grant application in the theater, they want to know what the impact what's the impact we're having. And of course, it's really hard to measure unless you're just talking about the number of people who attend an event. And so I'm curious to know if you have any sense of the impact of some of the things you did, whether it's just anecdotal or things that people have said to you, and if you can share a little bit of that.
Yes, and I apologize for my in and outness. The food is here. So with the launches, I think because Chantal and I are based here, and Ian in Toronto, I think it helps to have a hub of like putting CCTA on the map, even though yes, CCTA is all over the map. And I think our impact across the 4 launches is like bringing, I think especially theater folks, but really anyone in New York City who is kind of connected to a downtown or indie arts realm, and even the sustainability conversation, to gather together and connect with one another. And I think for artists who have come and even been involved with our CCTA launches, there's like this is how I can use my art to address climate. And I think that's what the whole festival is about. So it's like kind of manifesting it from our hub.
For us, it's really the impact on students is probably the greatest, and it kind of speaks to what you're working on, Julia, where when students first encounter this, and this is both for my university students and the school, this younger school students that we brought in, students from school, but to take the kind of climate anxiety that they have and feel like they're doing something through their kind of like creative expression. We give them a lot of autonomy in how they want to stage the plays as well. So I think opening up those conversations in a space of theater is really useful for them to address those anxieties, as well as the fact that our students then really, we set this expectation at the beginning, these are first year students, that the theater you make should be about something. Otherwise, why are you making it today? What's the point of putting this on today? Why are you having this conversation today? And as well as thinking about the sustainable kind of production and eco-sonography elements too, so that as they progress through their degree, that's their default way of doing things. It's not something they have to learn one way and then try to unlearn some of those practices so that they can then make them sustainable. It becomes the default from the beginning. So as I see those students progress and I think about how they make their model boxes now out of recycled material and how they think about where the materials are going to go after they make a set, for example, that's to me really the impact of this work. As well as some of the thematic elements as well, which we might come on to, but I think those are really key as well.
Yeah. I love this question because I was very shocked by the impact our shows had, mainly because we had a few waves of impact. So we had very initial responses by people who attended. We had a few audience members really saying it made them see things in a different way. It made them see the space, the garden that they love and attend in a different way, in terms of how beautiful it is, what it represents, in terms of a lot of talk about the community hope, which was the kind of the theme of the festival in 2023. All good things must begin. A lot of talk about what it feels like, talking about what is our dream and what is our hope in a community. And then we thought it was done, right? But we did take a video of the show, which, by the way, was really a coincidence because our videographer had a camera malfunction and all the videos were deleted. And then I remembered I saw one guy in the audience with a phone and I got his number and I texted him and I was like, do you have the video? And he sent it to me and now we're great friends. And I do have the video and it's on YouTube, available completely for free with subtitles, which took me like 20 hours to do, for accessibility, for full accessibility of everyone. And what we saw is that people 2 years almost after the performance date are still finding this show and responding to it. Last year, we all of a sudden joined the Global Voices Archive with that video by Echo Stage. I don't know if you know these guys. We 4 months ago, we had reviewers review our show, like from the video, a year and a half after it's performed. And they had a really emotional response to it. They wrote a very beautiful and very touching review about how they had to watch it several times because they kept discovering new things as they were watching it about the whole thematic emotional impact of climate change. So really, we've had the great fortune of having the show continue to touch people a lot after it's performed, which I'm very grateful for. And also the very connection with the Moore Jackson Community Garden, who we still perform there, we still do events there, we still collaborate with them on their composting elements. The connection with CCTA, which I was fortunate, like last month, I was speaking at a panel in Broadway Con and I brought it up and like 4 people approached me afterwards to find your website and find out how they can be next year's event and do a community action themselves. So I think that the connection between us, that we're a young theater company with a lot of emerging indie off-Broadway artists, and this festival has been really special and heartwarming and impactful to me.
This is a tricky one to answer just because, like, I could answer it from multiple levels for it. I mean, I think when it's brought into like the classroom or any of the events that we had, whether or not they're with professionals or some sort of blend there, especially from the design side, one of the impacts is just that there is material to work with. I have in just the last couple of weeks had the great privilege of working on Pocket Bar Kids. Where that is actually the way that like the entire company decided to work. And as someone who this is like my niche, it is like the first time I've really been in that situation. And so, not to say that that's necessarily a CCTA impact, but thinking about like having the material to work with, having the plays available, having collaborators, having it networked, having different ways of seeing what other people have done over time, and sort of like the permission that comes with that. It's been really interesting to see like the types of text evolve as people see what they can do with it and see what people end up creating out of it, and sort of like that sort of act of generosity of putting it out there, of like connecting people together, and then giving people to permission to work in ways that align with their values. That it's hard to do if you're going start to finish with something that you're going for an entire production with. And so like just creating those entry points that allows someone to explore those things and then becomes part of that conversation. I often say that like the reason that I care about doing this in theater is because like civilization, society is all just a performance anyway. Like we just agree that it exists. And so like if you invert that, like then if we want to change it, then we have to perform something different. So that like bringing this into like, I see it all as like a modeling exercise. We're trying to model different ways of being. And so whatever we can do for that and like empower people to be creative in the ways that they're doing that, I think is great. And I think you just have to see in the number of events, the number of plays, like it's the connections that are made, those who come back, those relationships get built that we try and capture on the website to make it visible, like how people want to work together, I think is the biggest thing. Yeah.
Thank you. I want to open it up for questions to invite you to be part of the conversation. But since you talked about, I just want to add one thing because we haven't mentioned it. So in our all our years so far, in total, we have presented over 500 events in 30 countries and reached about 70,000 people. So all of those little events everywhere really add up. Yeah, so any questions or comments for our panelists?
They all want the news.
The news, yeah. Okay, well, we can, there's food, I can tell you that afterwards. So we can keep mingling. Maybe any last words before we wrap up the panel?
I have last words.
Okay.
I talk a lot, sorry. Yeah, just that to reflect, with you all here in this room. When I started Needs More Work Productions and I had to select like a motto, a tagline, to be in the Instagram profile, whatever. Our motto is that we're a spicy, bold, and colorful theater company for a better tomorrow. And that is because I think I very much agree. I love that you said that because I was immediately agreeing that art is here to serve a purpose, right? Art has a role, and we as artists have huge responsibility about the kind of content we create. Whether we select to accept it or not, people will be deeply impacted by the content that we create. Either way. So it is a question of whether we take this responsibility and do something with it and create something that's useful and that's beneficial to society, or do we choose to let it go? And to me, participating in CCTA and doing theater in collaboration with community events, with community partners, and doing an action with your show, which is something I've been thinking about even not for CCTA. I've been thinking about for my life because I think it's a great model. It's really a way to do that. It's a way to take that responsibility and use the power we have as artists for the better. So if you're sitting in the room and you're an artist and you haven't done CCTA, I really encourage you to take a look into doing the 2025 one, because I think it's a wonderful way to put that into action. I don't know if anyone else wants to. Do you want to talk?
Oh no, I was gonna like, send it back because I feel like although there's a question down here, I'll run the mic.
Hi, thank you all so much for sharing. I have a question about the future of CCTA. So my understanding is that up until now, the process is that you commission playwrights, and that they produce the 50 scripts, and those become available. But just looking at like eco-dramaturgy and like eco-scenography, I'm curious about like if you all have thought about adopting a format where instead of commissioning playwrights, you might commission like a designer, for example, or an actor or a dramaturg to produce sort of like a different model that doesn't start with the playwright but starts from a different point of the production process. Just a genuine curiosity. Yeah, thank you.
Well, we've yet to commission with the designers from the very beginning. I actually wonder if this is a good segue, actually based off of both of these comments, to talk about how 2025 might work for things, which is in the script as your responsibility to talk about that. I can tell you, like we've been trying to integrate the first a seated design, so like a design concepts, and then when we did the like international collaboration version of them, using the plays as their own sort of seated concept to like design experiences like in a devised setting where you may not actually recognize it, has been something that's also emerged as well as like there's something about I think the freedom of as long as you produce the play in some way. There's no prescription for how they're done, that there's like a lot of latitude that's taken there. So in some ways it's like having a document that you can say, here's a place of starting. And there are some that have themselves been sheet music. There are some that themselves have been more sort of like just a poem, like doesn't look like a dramatic text as well. I think some have come with visual imagery as well. And so sort of evolved into that point. As well. It's a good question for the future of the CCTA because we're also looking at the model change there, but I don't know if we want to wrap up the panel before we start getting into that information.
Yeah, let's give a round of applause to our panelists.